Today, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Maria Cliff, Head of Operations and Business Development for MTR UK. Maria Cliff, welcome, a very warm welcome to the Intuitive Insights podcast.
Thanks, Nina.
So lovely to see you. You've been, I know you're in a new role now, Head of Operations and Business Development for MTR. I'm going to say MDR. It's not MDR, it's MTR UK. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about this new role. But as I know already, and I'm really looking forward to sharing with our podcast audience, you've had a cracking career to date, haven't you? Haven't always been in the rail industry. So I'm really interested to hear your career story to date. Our audience love to know why transport, why did you come into this industry? And please talk us through the roles that you've done right up to present day in relation to what your current role is with MTR.
Great, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to have a chat with you as always. And I guess let me start by telling you about what I'm doing at the moment. You're right, working for MTR UK. I've been there almost 4 months now, actually. Oh, wow. It's absolutely flown by. And at the moment, my role it's interesting because it's split really between two main responsibilities. So one is providing oversight and support to our existing operating businesses. So we operate the Elizabeth line through London, which is about to reach a pinnacle of opening our central operating section in the summer. Really exciting, connecting the east with the west, with a number of amazing new stations. So it's kind of all guns firing, on that, and we're all building up to that launch this summer. And then the other side of my role is also looking at what's on the horizon, and identifying new opportunities, new ways that we can look at developing three parts of the business. One is operations, which is my bag. The other is infrastructure, and also property as well. So we've kind of got three pillars of the business, and where there is opportunity to combine a couple of those or even all three, that's what we're really trying to do, including bringing the Hong Kong model over to the UK, which we're looking at doing at Liverpool Street Station in London, where we're investing money into the station to improve the size of the concourse, improve the capacity, but also just generally invest and improve the experience for customers. And that is all off balance sheet, not taxpayer money. So really exciting stuff. And the first time that's been done in the UK. So lots and lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, amazing. So you might not be able to tell me too much about this, but when you say bringing the Hong Kong model across to the UK,
yes,
are you able to tell us kind of a bit more about that in terms of what that means? What does the Hong Kong model look like?
Yes, so it's investing in the station as a place. So in Hong Kong, MTR is known for operating all parts of the railway system. So that's both the track and the trains, but also utilising the space around and above the station as well, in terms of property. So it's quite difficult to do in the UK, because Hong Kong is set up in a different way, but it allows real investment in the station and private funding to benefit the customers, and so that's the aim, really.
I get really excited about station stuff. That's my admission right here and right now. Yeah. I think so. Obviously, we work with the rail industry, but if I was going to work in it, I would want to do something relating to stations. I just think that they are a massive asset that the UK railway could be making so much more of. So I'm going to be watching with interest, and the fact that there's private funding there as well kind of makes it even better. And for you to be involved with something which is a first in the UK is also makes it even more exciting. So look at you, I can't wait to see this as it evolves and we start to see the results of it.
Yeah, you're right about stations. One of my favourite roles was, being duty station manager at Oxford. and just kind of thrust into the activity, and you just find your feet and you just have to get on with it.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's take you back in time to when you started work, because, and this is kind of like for a lot of people, it's, oh, do you want me to go back, right to the beginning? And it's like, yeah, actually, I'd really love you to go right back to the beginning. And so what did you do? And also, why did you do it? What took you on the path? And I think it's fair to say that every single guest we've had on the podcast describes their career journey as a wiggly one. It's never, this kind of idea that your career trajectory is just a straight line is a bit of a myth. So tell us about your wiggles, Maria, right from the beginning all the way through to present day.
First time someone's asked me that question.
I'm so glad it was me.
So when I was at university, I had the opportunity to study abroad for a year. So I went to Singapore, studied at the National University of Singapore over there, and travelled throughout all of Southeast Asia as part of my course, which was absolutely amazing. But even just before that, I remember being a really small child and I got some inheritance from a family member and I wanted to use it to buy a mobile home. And I got my mum to take me to Glossop Caravans to have a look at what I could get, which wasn't a lot with the money that I had, but it's always been in me to want to pack up everything I've got and move about and travel the world and have that kind of freedom, I think. So moving into transport was something that I had always considered, but I didn't really know where, I didn't know how, I didn't know whether it would be logistics or if it would be the railway or what sector of transport it would be. So when I graduated, I moved to Japan for a year and worked for the Japanese government out in Shizuoka in Japan, right by Mount Fuji. It was so cool. I could see Mount Fuji out of the windows of my office. And when I came back after a year, that's when I started to apply for graduate roles. At the time, I was working in a prison in Salford in Manchester. And funnily enough, I applied for the first group graduate scheme for rail operations, amongst others, and also the prison service graduate scheme. And I got offered both roles on the same day and had to make a decision which job I would take. And I decided to take the railway path, but ironically, I could have ended up as a governor of a prison somewhere in the northeast of England. So my life could have been very different today.
Absolutely. Good heavens. So when you were working in the prison in Salford, what were you doing then, Maria? What were you involved with?
I was a family support worker. So working with the partners and the children of the guys that were in the prison. It was a 1,500 all-male private prison, and our role was to help keep the bonds and the connections between the guys who were inside and also their families on the outside, so that when they were released, they had that connection and then they had that support network that reduced the chances of them reoffending. When they were out back in the world. So it was a harrowing role, but I have to say it was amazing, and it taught me to be able to find common ground and make connections with anyone, people who you have zero in common with. You just learn to listen and try and understand what they're going through, really.
Wow. It stands to reason that there would be that role. However, what strikes me with what you've just said is that my first thought is that, I didn't know that role existed. I didn't know somebody did that. As I say, it stands to reason that you would. But it occurs to me that there are so many jobs out there that we don't know that people do. And when you're in school and, you're getting people kind of asking you what you want to do with your career, what do you want to do, what do you want to do when you grow up? There's so many things that we don't know about that happen unless you know somebody who does that role already. And it's kind of bringing me back to this. You've got to see it to be it. You've got to know about these roles and you've got to kind of have evidence of people who've done them and what they've got out of it. Because you can imagine, like you just said, hugely challenging to do. and how you kind of go home in the evening and forget about it before you go back in the following day, I'm not sure. But how rewarding. But they didn't get you. The rail industry.
No, they didn't. It's interesting what you just said, because I kind of feel like the railway is a bit like a house, in that if you're new to the railway and you bought a new house, you get to see it built from the ground up, and you get to see all the different factors that go into it and how it eventually becomes your home. But if you already know about the railway, or you know somebody who works there, or you've got a family member who's in the railway, you've kind of lived in an existing house already. So you've seen all the nuts and bolts, and you've seen all of the good memories, and you've seen all of the kind of the bad stuff that happens sometimes in life. So there's so many different factors to it, and people have no idea, when you strip it all back, actually all the things that people can do in our industry.
Huge opportunity. But so transport won over the prison service, and you went into first group on the graduate scheme. Tell us about that, Maria. How was that for you?
So I started up at ScotRail, which was great for me. I'd gone to university in Glasgow, so really happy to be back in Scotland. And it was a real kind of whistle-stop tour of all of the elements of the railway. So I was able to spend time with the driver's function, with on train. I trained as a guard. I also worked in revenue protection and with the fraud teams, with the safety teams, and it kind of showed me how to put all the parts of the railway together, and also cherry pick all the good stuff that I saw from all the managers, and shape how I wanted to approach my management style and my leadership style as well. So I remember fondly working trains, Glasgow to Edinburgh, and it was an eye-opening experience. So I was there for about 9-10 months,
right,
and then came down south to work for what was First Great Western at the time, working for an amazing woman, Claire Mann, who was our regional manager, and then carried on doing my different placements, starting with Oxford as a education manager, and figured out what I wanted to do, really, and got my first permanent role as a guards manager, managing Reading and Redhill depots, so about 150 guards, and it was great. We had a great team, not just in the on-train team. We were, we were a great unit as an East region. Everybody worked together, drivers on train and stations, and it was when I look back on, the buzz that the railway has and had, that was a really fun time working on the railway. Then I moved on into what people said the big bad world of drivers. I can remember having a conversation with somebody who said, how are you going to deal with drivers? And I said to them, well, I spent a year in a prison in Manchester. I think I'll be all right. And spent 3 years, at the time, the only female driver depot manager for Great Western, and learned a lot. My drivers kind of gave me almost an idiot's guide to driving a train, the systems. I had never been a driver, and so that was quite a challenge to overcome the stigma that came with that, really, and my background. But I used to do 2 cab rides a day in and out of work, and it was brilliant. So learned a lot of my technical railway knowledge in that role, I would say.
Yeah, and I absolutely can understand that would be a fun place to be. It sounds like there was an amazing camaraderie. There was lots of great team stuff, but actually, yes, traditionally one of the most challenging roles on the railway. And you've gone in there, you're a bit different to the majority of people in the team. So there must have been challenges as well, Maria, in terms of establishing yourself. And kind of coming in with, you've never been a driver, you don't look and sound like the rest of them. So how did you overcome that? Because I absolutely 100% expect that there were challenges that you've had to overcome.
I think for me, the biggest factor was spending the 40 minutes in the cab each day with different drivers. And I never knew which driver it was going to be when the train pulled into the station when I was living in the Cotswolds. And whoever it was, I would get in the cab with, it didn't matter. And so being in their environment, being in their place of comfort and, familiarity allowed us to have more open and productive conversations than we ever would have in a mess room or in my office. And I learned so much about every single driver. And people love to talk about their families. We talked so much about holidays, where they were going, where I was going, and just finding that common ground again, I guess.
Yeah.
And, them knowing that what we spoke about in the cab wouldn't go any further, and building that trust with everybody, really. And I did get some funny looks, climbing up into the cab of a HST on the platform, socks of people wondering what was going on, because they didn't expect, I guess, someone like me to be getting in the cab of a train, which is different now. But, 7, 8 years ago was quite a different picture.
Yeah. It's another piece of evidence there that the railway is all about people, isn't it? It's actually, and yes, we need the trains to get us from A to B, but the more people I speak to, the more evidence I have that this industry is about its people, and that's what makes the difference. And building those relationships and getting to people, I think you make a really good point, meeting them on their own ground, in their own environment, rather than come to my office and let's have a conversation, or in the mess room when perhaps they need their break in between their shifts, whatever, So meeting them in their own environment, I think, is a top tip by the sound of it. But it does sound like you had a great time. So what happened next?
So then I moved into a role as senior program manager, looking after the Heathrow Express management contract that Great Western were developing. So the Heathrow Express staff 2P'd over to Great Western, so managing that transition, looking at the fleet cascade as well, when the Class 387s were being fitted with ETCS and being branded to go down to Heathrow Airport. And I did that role for just under a year, and then had the opportunity to move to East West Railway Company at its kind of inaugural stage, I guess.
Yeah.
And join the ops team there.
Yeah, that was very much that kind of exciting opportunity of a blank piece of paper, and being part of that initial startup team, and that role was just a perfect role for you, wasn't it? Kind of going in and using all of the skills and experience that you'd built up to that point.
Yeah, if someone hands you a blank piece of paper and says, do you want to help to develop the concept for what this railway could and should be? I mean, who was I to say no to that? It was amazing.
What were the highlights, Maria?
We did last year and the year before, we were out doing non-statutory public consultation, which during COVID was a real challenge because of course, the ideal scenario is that you get out and you go to village halls and you go to local community centres and talk to people face to face, so you can really listen and empathise and try and understand their views. And we'd done that previously as the company before COVID. So setting all of that up in a virtual environment and having to communicate through, PowerPoint presentations and cameras was a real challenge. But one that we kind of rose to, and we had a huge response to the non-stat consultation, but also including a lot of support for the scheme. So, the railway between Oxford and Cambridge exists in parts, but there was an opportunity to really create, a line and a service that served the community and improved their lives and attracted people into the area and gave better jobs and housing and lots and lots of benefits. So that was a real highlight. I think the other highlight for me was when I had started not long after, I was asked to lead the rolling stock procurement.
Yeah.
Which was something, if you'd have told me a few years before I would do, I never would have believed you, because again, you know, I had a railway background, but rolling stock was an area that was new to me. Had a lot of support, had a lot of really great people on the technical side of the procurement, but doing all of the market engagement, developing the strategy, taking it through the department and treasury, and you know, being a bit of a one-woman band. We were a small team, but that was a great opportunity, and also something that is definitely one of my career highlights, and enabled me to build my network more than I'd ever realised. Meet great people from across the industry in the supply chain and the manufacturers and the rolling stock companies. So I'm really grateful for East West Rail trusting me to get that done.
Yeah, it was a big job, wasn't it? And like you say, so many aspects of it completely new to you, but because you've kind of evidenced, I guess, throughout your career that give me something to do and I'll go and do it, and you've developed that style for how you do it in a very kind of, I love it because it's very straightforward and common sense approach. But you do so much of what you do is kind of with that network, with that relationship side. And I am absolutely always overwhelmed with your memory of who's who, where they are. And I'm like so envious of it, because it's kind of like you instantly remember names, which is something that I've always been able to do. But for some reason, which might be to do with my advancing years, I can't do that as well anymore.
I mean, it does help me to wear name badges as well. That's a benefit.
Absolutely. And so from East West Rail and then into the role with MTR, which, as you say, you've been in for 4 months now, and getting your feet under the table in terms of supporting on the Elizabeth line, which is really exciting. Again, something brand new. And then all of this stuff around new opportunities. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens at Liverpool Street in terms of that development. It sounds amazing. So lots going on, and you've seen some change already, obviously, in the industry. You've alluded to the fact that, you know, seeing you climbing in the cab now might not look as strange as it did 7 or 8 years ago. There's been some change in the way we work, but we are at the kind of the very beginning of some massive transformational change.
Yeah.
And I think that anyone who's worked in the industry, it's 9 years since I came into the industry now. And I think that we would all say that change is necessary and was probably overdue. So the pandemic has kind of accelerated that. Still quite a bit to do. I'm going to do my traditional intuitive insights, get my magic wand out now, and I'm going to grant you 3 wishes for what would, if you were ruling the world, Maria, if you were sat at the top of this industry and it was entirely in your gift in relation to what we focused on, what we did differently, what you would like to see, what would that be?
I guess the first one is pretty simple, which is people working together across the industry. And there's lots of really good examples where that is happening right now and has happened since the pandemic and well before the pandemic in pockets that weren't necessarily shouted about. I think in the last, couple of weeks, I've been involved in the free travel for Ukrainian nationals that is provided, I should say, from last Sunday across the network. And the meetings and the kind of force behind it was so joined up across government and BTP and Network Rail and all the operators, and really showcases what we can do really quickly if everyone works together and everyone is doing what they're doing for the right reasons. And that's a kind of a macro, I guess, example with, the Ukrainian nationals, but we need more of that.
Yeah.
And we need to take out the pain points. Someone referred to them as time vampires to me many years ago, and I really like that expression. What is everybody's time vampire, or numerous time vampires? How can we remove that, or share the pain and share the love to make things better? And there's a lot of impetus to do it now. There's a lot of people who are waiting for change, but ultimately we've still got a railway to run, and we still need to keep people and goods moving. So there's a balance there between what can we do now and how forward looking should we be. So I guess that would be my first wish. My second wish, and I'll get on my soapbox, is when it comes to decision making from a financial perspective, taking a view of a whole life cost. Right. For a railway system or a project, or things that are going to be implemented for the better of the customers and the passengers. It's a real challenge at the moment. Everywhere we're hearing there's no money, or it's challenging, and you have to, really provide that that kind of outward justification for why we're spending on certain areas. And for me, if there's a really solid business case that looks at the whole life cost of an investment, we should do it. Again, quite simple.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the interesting parts, isn't it? In terms of, so I didn't understand at all until I came into the industry how political it was and how closely tied to the government the rail industry is. Ultimately run by private operators, but very much in the gift of the Treasury, and even more so because of the last 2 years and the amount of public money which has been put into the railway. But that kind of now the challenge of, as you've said, we need to invest. There's money that needs to be spent, but we also know full well that there's areas that we could be more efficient in. And kind of, I think what it comes down to from my outside perspective looking in is that trust, that the Treasury or the government or at large needs to trust the industry to deliver what it needs to deliver at the cost it needs to deliver it, which comes to your point. If there's a strong business case for why you should spend that money, then why don't we spend it then?
It's my very simplistic world that I live in.
And then maybe there'll be people listening to this who understand, the kind of, maybe they are in the thick of the financial aspects, who are kind of, well, it's not that easy. And no, it's not that easy, but you
gave me a wish, so
absolutely. I might have to kind of like supercharge my magic wand for that one. What's your third one, Maria?
My third one is we're focusing a lot, rightly, after COVID about getting people back on trains. But for me, we haven't really answered the question about why people who didn't travel by train before COVID, why they didn't do it, and how we get people who've never considered the railways to use the railways. I think it's more evident now with the bounce back of the leisure market over, in the weekend travel, that people are seeing rail as a really great way to get around. But my wish would be that rail was everybody's first choice, or public transport was everybody's first choice, and that people could do it from their door to their end destination. We are getting there. There's some really cool stuff out there, with a lot of the OEMs and people who are looking at mobility as a service and autonomous vehicles. But for me, that seems really far in the future. And, talking to people during the non-stop consultation about where we were going to build new stations, outside of Cambridge and why, their key question was, well, how do I get to the station? So that would be my other wish, that everybody, rail was for all and it was accessible to everybody.
Yeah. And that kind of, for me, links in with your first wish around people working together across the industry, but kind of lifting it up a level and kind of from rail into transport as a whole, because there's some great innovations happening in terms of demand responsive transport and how do the whole active travel piece, which I think is really exciting. I live, I guess I'm about 3 miles away from my nearest station at Buckshaw Parkway. I have no bus service from where I live. I have to walk 1.5 miles to a bus stop. There are no street lights where I live. So if I'm doing it in summer and I set off early enough, and I try and ignore the fact that where I live is a big farming community, so don't wear your best shoes if you're out walking. So I've got, I could walk 1.5 miles to the bus stop and then get the bus to the railway station, but it's not an easy option. It just isn't. And there are lots of people in my kind of position who would like to use public transport more but can't. So that innovation piece around how do we do, as you've said, the kind of the door-to-door service to make it easier for people. And I am definitely with you on there's lots and lots of talk about getting people back to the railway. And I'm going, yes, but what about all these people who've never been on a train and have never used the railway system? How do we get them engaged and wanting to use it? So lots to go at, absolutely lots to go at.
And we should be riding the wave, because I think there's been lots of positive media presence about everything that happened during COVID and all of the good stuff that the railway was doing in terms of, keeping people moving, getting key workers to where they needed to be, keeping the supermarkets stocked through, freight. That has opened up people's minds to what the railway is, and we need to keep plugging it.
Yeah, we've got to keep some momentum, haven't we? Yeah, most definitely. So you mentioned one of your managers earlier on, Claire Mann. So I'm kind of coming on to this part of the podcast conversation now, where I'm asking you to kind of reflect back on your career to date. And you kind of already alluded to the fact that there are people who have managed you and you've learnt from. And I'm going to guess that you'd, like the rest of us, that some of those people you've learnt things about how you would like to manage, how you want to develop your style, and then other things that you think, won't be doing that. So there's kind of lots of learning. As you look back over your career so far, Maria, who have been the role models for you? Who have been the people that you've looked to kind of like who've inspired and motivated you?
So there's one standout person, and I met her relatively recently. She actually spoke on an International Women's Day event that I attended a few years ago. Her name is Dr. Kamal Hoti, and she came over to the UK in the 60s from India, and she faced a lot of kind of cultural adversity during her career, and she joined the bank. She joined Lloyds Bank and was the first ever female bank manager in the Southeast, and the bank's first Asian manager ever.
Right.
And the first thing that she said to me when I met her was, would your team walk over hot coals for you? And I thought, that's a really interesting question. And she said she starts most of her conversations with people that don't know her and who she hasn't met before with that question, because that's where she wants to be. That's what she aims to do in any role or any kind of leadership position that she's found herself in terms of building that trust, being authentic and being herself. And her story is one that was quite harrowing, quite up and down. And she is an amazing lady. She's very softly spoken, but has such gravitas and such kind of confidence in, quiet confidence, that means that she's in many respects quite different to me, but I really admired her approach. Yeah. And she really has such gumption and just got on with what she needed to do despite facing real challenges in her career. So I was lucky enough to be coached by her for a couple of years. We built up a really great relationship. She was awarded an OBE in 2017 for her services to diversity. And anybody that doesn't know about her, should definitely look her up, because a lot of what she said really, really resonated with me. And it doesn't matter that she's not in transport. It doesn't matter that she's come from banking, because we, across every industry, I think, have got shared experiences.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to the leadership side of things, because that area, that doesn't matter what industry sector you're in, what job you do. It's that kind of understanding who you are, and then having the confidence and the courage to be yourself, to take your whole self to work every day. And I am genuinely fascinated by people who are softly spoken and who are quite gentle in terms of their communication, because I'm really aware that the more excited and enthusiastic I get, the louder I get, and the more the Lancashire accent comes out. So whenever I meet somebody who's like that, I'm kind of, I need to learn from this person. I need to be, try to be more measured and more calm. But I love being in their presence because it automatically kind of does that. And thank you for using one of my all-time favourite words that I haven't heard for so long, which is gumption. I think I last heard it at Christmas when I watched The Holiday, because Kate Winslet uses it with Arthur. Yes. So that's the last time I heard that word, and I'm going to make it my mission to use it as often as I can for the rest of the week. I love it.
On the bandwagon.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And also that you've had that coaching, and the fact that you've actually it's taken me right back to something you said right at the beginning, Maria, where you were lucky enough to go to Singapore as part of your university degree. And I had this conversation with another podcast guest, actually, Rita Williams, who works at TfL. And Rita was talking about her career, and I said to her what I'm about to say to you. This wasn't lucky, though, was it? You did something to put yourself in that position. You weren't just sat there one day and somebody came over and said, "Oh, Maria, you'll do. We need somebody for Singapore. Can you go?" Yeah. You will have put yourself in that position to spot the opportunity, to make sure that you were visible for the people making the decision. And the fact that Kamal has been a speaker at an event, you've then taken action, you've gone and introduced yourself, you've had a conversation, and as a result, you've had 2 years of learning through the coaching. So a really great example of seeing an opportunity and grabbing it. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks. Sometimes it doesn't, it pays off most of the time, Nina, but I can remember being on the plane to Tokyo when I decided I was going to go to Japan and thinking, I don't even know how to say good morning in Japanese, and the panic kind of set in, and I thought, I've made this decision. What on earth have I done? Yeah. Is this the right thing to do? Yeah. And you just kind of have to push through and carry on.
Absolutely. And there are lots of different, obviously, lots of different people in the world with different approaches to risk. And it's absolutely not the same, but similar. I distinctly remember having accepted a job when I worked for the Royal Bank of Scotland in Lancashire, was offered a job in head office in Edinburgh, and said, "Oh, yes, please." And then driving up to Scotland for that first, I started on the Monday, I was travelling up on the Sunday, and I was thinking, oh, right, what have I done here then? So it's kind of like, not necessarily, I did know how to say good morning. I was all right when I got there, I was fine. But that whole kind of, gosh, we've made a decision, you've gone for it, you've grabbed the opportunity. And then sometimes it's like, oh, you realise you've done it. But then people with a different attitude to risk would have kind of had lots of spreadsheets on the go, weighing up the pros and cons and should we do it or not, by which time we're already on the bus or the plane.
It's too late, yeah.
Too late, yeah. So I'm going to, I could, as always, I could talk to you for ages. So I'm good, but I need to bring the conversation to a close with my traditional question of my guests on the virtual couch. I'd love you to share a quote with us, Maria, in terms of something that inspires you or can motivate you or informs the way that you think. So if you could leave us with a favourite quote of yours, then I'd really appreciate it.
Well, Nina, I have to say you've slightly stolen my thunder on this, because earlier in the podcast, you actually mentioned the quote that I had in my head.
Oh, really?
Yes. And my quote was that you can't be what you can't see.
Ah, okay. And true. And worth saying it again, actually. You can't be what you can't see. And absolutely, we need more of that, don't we? We need to see different people in different roles in the industry, and also talk about what those different roles are. So to make sure that people are aware that you don't actually need to wear a boiler suit and have a bit of oil on the end of your nose in order to work in the railway, because there's lots of very exciting career opportunities to follow.
Yeah, and I think if people look around their family and their friends and their local communities, is that what they see in the railway?
Yeah, I know it's certainly my daughter, her friends. I mean, obviously, Niamh is well versed in how exciting the rail industry is. However, when we have her friends round to the house and I start talking to them about what kind of careers they're considering, so these primarily all girls, they're at uni now. So have you considered the railway? No. Why would I? I don't want to drive a train. Well, okay, fair enough. But there's loads of other jobs that you can do. We are the best kept secret, Maria. This industry is
join us.
Secret. Exactly. So I'm sure that people will be inspired and will be motivated by hearing your story. I'm super grateful to you for joining me. I always love your company, you know I do. So I've really enjoyed this conversation this morning. Thank you so much, Maria Cliff. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite.
My huge thanks to Maria for sharing her journey so far, her thoughts and her insights on working for the UK rail industry.